I know I was right. I know I was right. And you know that the exact reason why I forbade myself from going to law school is because I saw the writings on the wall. I was like, American jurisprudence is very vulnerable to an authoritarian just reshaping the rule of law and then the courts and the lawyers just having to adapt to that, right? So I was like, I'm not gonna do that because I did international law and I was like, contrary to international justice, where you can go against superior orders if that is against the norms in American jurisprudence, there isn't the guardrails to stop that. And y'all were just like, oh, that's just theory, Sengael. Is it theory now? You see, the Supreme Court, hidden within their birthright decision, says this. Basically, that the executive has to follow the law, right? No one is arguing that. But the judiciary does not have, absolute authority to enforce it. Rather, it says that sometimes the law prohibits the judiciary from enforcing the constitutional order on the executive. And in fact, there are ambiguities within the Constitution that basically, if it's not forbidden, it's probably allowed. And the fact that we haven't actually codified the Constitution to be more clear means that they are using what? A constitutional coup. The ambiguities of the Constitution are being reshaped and redefined in order to advance an agenda because there's so much holes in it. What this means is that the Constitution is meaningless. It's meaningless. It is reshaped by an authoritarian, and the courts are incapable of fixing that. And why I told you this, they're not gonna maximize on their contempt charges because then if the executive goes against it, your illusion of the rule of law falls apart. What does that mean? The anarchy begins. And what Thomas Hobbes, the English philosopher, has said is that the bad government is better than no government because at least there's law and order, and a bad government there's no law and order and a government that doesn't exist. So it's better to have tyranny than anarchy because tyranny is a power to a sort of law and order, and anarchy has no law at all. So they have a job in tyranny, they don't have a job in anarchy. And this is the thing, because when I talk about solutions, people are always like, well, but we have a constitutional, duty to XYZ. It obviously doesn't mean anything. So I don't know why we think that because it doesn't apply to him, it continues to apply to us. And yes, the courts are very limited in what they can do, and they can do contempt charges, but they don't have to listen. And obviously, who supports their security of the justices, of the judges? The U.S. Marshals. The U.S. Marshals are under who? The executive, which means that they won't want to go against the authoritarian, right? So in this reality, we have judges who won't want to step out of line. We have politicians who won't want to step out of line. We have federal agencies who won't want to step out of line. We have law firms who don't want to step out of line. We have private, agencies who don't want to step out of line. We have mainstream media who don't want to step out of line. Why? Why? Because they're scared what happened in Minnesota will happen to them. In that reality, because our elected and appointed officials are scared, they're going to fuck us. The courts have obviously collapsed the constitutional meaning and constitutional integrity. But remember what John Locke says. Remember what is engraved within DC, the Department of Justice. Wherever law ends, tyranny begins. And we are at the end with this decision. So what that means is that the state gets much more power. The state gets much more power. Now, this reality of an authoritarian shift started even before this, and it started on January 6th, right? The fact that we ignored the Constitution then, that allowed for us to ignore it now. And I told you, if we say that Amendment 14, Section 3 is optional, we're going to say that a lot of other things are optional, right? And even if it's not optional to the courts, it's going to be optional to the executive. And now reality, who is in charge of defending us? Our state governments. Now, that's not good news for red states, right? But for blue states, it should be capable of holding us to a sort of sanctuary place where they can defend our state boundaries, our state constitution against the federal overreach. Trust that the courts will work in their favor. But what the courts are saying is that they cannot even force him to abide by, their decisions. They cannot force him to abide by the Constitution because it's meaningless. And this is very serious because if the courts cannot enforce the Constitution on the executive, then who does? What they're telling us is that no one. And it has to be the states. Yes, the states have to get some consequences from whatever that may be. But what we have to realize is that we're in unprecedented territories, which means that we require unprecedented solutions. People ask me, well, what do you suggest? And when I say what I suggest, they find a technicality reason as to why we couldn't do that. The Holocaust was lawful. How do we prosecute something that was lawful? It was unprecedented, so we had an unprecedented solution, right? Now, our American theory guides onto that in regards to taxation. People are like, well, that's complicated. Sometimes it's the companies who give it out. That's why the governor has to give that emergency powers as to how he would put that forward, right? But the reality is that we want to just utilize excuses as to why we cannot do XYZ. And then what's the alternative to not doing XYZ? Doing nothing, which changes nothing. In this reality where the Constitution is meaningless, the states can even invoke, that 2A, that militia against the federal government. Now, will it? That's a question, right? But ultimately, what we're seeing is a blanket allowance of him to go against the court and not face any justice, not face any correction. In that reality, I would be fucking angry at my governor if I was you, which I am, Governor Newsom, because he just thinks that lawsuits and like strongly worded words on social media and on videos is gonna do anything, but it's not. It's not. So it's like I told you, we're gonna allow for a president like Andrew Jackson to just keep doing what they're doing and then eventually just hope and pray that they will, abide by the judicial order, right? That's not a way to be it, especially when it's one where the constitutional order has been eroded already. Amendment 14, Section 3, due process, all of these things. It allows for the courts to have much more decisions in alignment with him. This is how law and order is reshaped. He utilized the courts to position that, hey, we don't have that authority to force everything against him, and we don't know what you guys are gonna do. In that reality, we gain much more powers. We have to go to John Locke. We have to go to American theory, the Federalist Papers. We have to go through all of that in that positions that the main entity who is in charge of our defense has to be the state or us. Preferably the state, because that's more lawful, and with us it's going to be a bunch of sham trials, right? But ultimately, if we don't force on our state governor to be that commander-in-chief, then who do we have? No one. And that's it. I don't know what to tell you. The Constitution is officially meaningless.